Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going deep into the world of criminal profiling. You guys sent in so much material for this one.
Yeah.
We've got academic articles, true crime stories, even some court cases. We're going to try to answer the big questions like,
Right.
where did profiling even come from?
Yeah.
How is it actually used? And how has technology, changed the game?
Right, right.
One thing that really jumped out at me
Yeah.
was just how long people have been trying to figure out,
Yeah.
what makes a criminal a criminal?
It's a question that goes back centuries, but the methods to answer it have
Oh, yeah.
certainly evolved.
For sure. We're starting all the way back with this guy named Cesare Lombroso.
Okay.
He was an Italian physician back in the late 1800s.
Right.
And he was absolutely convinced that criminals were born that way.
Yeah.
And he called them born criminals.
That's right.
He believed that criminals were basically like throwbacks, right? Like to a more primitive...
Primitive stage of evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. He even called them atavisks. Which means they have these traits
Right.
that had like reappeared.
Reappeared from our distant ancestors.
Yeah. So they're not just criminals, but they're like caveman criminals.
Basically.
So what kind of traits are we talking about here?
So Lombroso was really obsessed with physical features.
Okay.
So he thought things like having a large jaw or high cheekbones or
Wow.
even an indentation at the back of the skull were all signs of a criminal mind. He meticulously measured and documented.
Wow.
All these features, absolutely convinced that he had found the key to
Like a cheat code?
identifying criminals before they even committed a crime.
Well, it's kind of ironic, I guess, that someone so focused on physical appearance,
Yeah.
his theories didn't really hold up under scrutiny.
They did not.
But even though he was wrong,
Yeah.
didn't his work still have a lasting impact?
Yeah. Lombroso's work, even though it was wrong, it helped to shift the way we thought about crime to a more scientific approach.
Interesting.
And, even though he was focused on, physical features, he was trying to find a way to categorize and even predict criminal behavior.
Yeah.
And that paved the way for other researchers to consider more factors like social and psychological influences in criminal behavior.
So even though he was wrong about the caveman stuff,
Yeah.
he got the ball rolling.
Exactly.
It's interesting, though, how this idea of biology is destiny really took hold. And the next step in that direction was the eugenics movement, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, the eugenics movement took Lombroso's idea of, inherited criminality and just ran with it.
They did, but they took it in a very dark direction.
Yeah.
So they believed that traits like criminality, but even mental illness and poverty were all hereditary and that they could be bred out of society.
It's a scary thought. I know they advocated for some pretty extreme measures.
Yes, they did. And unfortunately, some of their ideas were actually put into practice.
Really?
Forced sterilization, for example, of people that they deemed unfit to reproduce.
Oh, wow.
Was a reality in a lot of places. Even in the United States, the movement lost a lot of support.
Oh, I see.
After the atrocities that were committed by the Nazis. But the legacy of that kind of thinking, unfortunately, lingers.
It's a good reminder that even when we have good intentions, things can go very wrong. So we've got Lombroso focused on physical features.
All right.
We've got the eugenics movement obsessed with heredity. But what about the psychological side of things?
Right.
Was there any researchers who were looking at how, the mind might influence criminal behavior?
Absolutely. So, as these biological theories were gaining some traction, there was a totally different approach that was emergent from the world of psychology, particularly with the work of Sigmund Freud.
Ah, Freud. The id, the ego, and the superego.
That's right.
I vaguely remember those terms from Psych 101, but I always wondered, how does that apply to criminal behavior?
Freud's theories had a huge impact on how we think about criminal motivation.
Okay.
And he believed that our actions, all of them, are driven by a really complex interplay between these three parts of the mind.
Gotcha.
So the id, that's all about primal urges and desires.
Right.
And the superego represents our conscience, our morality.
Yeah.
And then the ego is the part that tries to mediate between these two often competing forces.
So if your id is running the show.
Yes.
And there's no superego there to check it.
Exactly.
Then you might be more likely to just act without thinking or violently. Even if it means breaking the law.
That's one way to look at it.
Interesting.
So Freud's ideas really opened up this whole new way of thinking about criminality.
Okay.
It wasn't just about being born bad,
right.
but about these psychological forces that could really shape a person's behavior.
It seems like this was a big shift then from, saying you look like a criminal to like trying to understand, what's going on in someone's head.
Exactly. And at the same time, that there was this psychological perspective emerging. There was a growing movement to advocate for more humane treatment for people with mental illness.
Okay.
And that movement was really spearheaded by individuals like Dorlia Dix.
Gotcha.
And she challenged that, commonly held belief that mental illness automatically equaled criminal behavior.
That makes sense. Just because somebody has a mental illness doesn't mean they're going to commit crimes.
Right.
But we also can't ignore the fact that sometimes crimes are committed by people with serious mental health issues.
That's a really, really important point.
Yeah.
And it highlights the complexity of this whole issue.
Right.
There's no simple answer. There's no one-size-fits-all explanation for criminal behavior.
Right. It seems like the pendulum was swinging away from the biological determinism and toward a more nuanced understanding of human behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
But wasn't there this one case that
Yes.
really put profiling on the map?
Yeah.
The Mad Bomber?
Mad Bomber, yes. This case in 1956 was a turning point for criminal profiling.
Okay.
For 16 years, New York City was terrorized by the string of bombings.
Wow.
And the police, they were completely baffled.
16 years.
16 years.
That's crazy. So that's where Dr. James Brussel comes in, right?
Exactly. Dr. Brussel was a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And he was brought in to come up with a profile of this bomber.
Okay.
Based on the evidence they had and the nature of these crimes.
Right, right.
What he did was incredible.
Okay.
He predicted with amazing accuracy
Really?
all kinds of details about the bomber.
Like what?
Like his age, his ethnicity, his marital status.
Wow.
And even that, he would be wearing a double-breasted suit when they caught him.
Wait, hold on. He predicted
the double-breasted.
He would be wearing a double-breasted suit. How did he come up with that?
So Brussel's profile, it was this amazing combination of careful observation, psychological insight, and maybe a little bit of intuition, too.
Interesting.
So he analyzed the bomber's letters, the targets that he chose, the way the bombs were constructed. He even theorized about the bomber's relationship with his mother.
Oh, wow.
And how that might be playing a role in his crimes.
So it wasn't just like random guessing.
Oh, no, no.
He was like putting together a puzzle.
Exactly. It was a psychological puzzle
yeah.
that he was putting together based on the evidence.
And it worked.
It did.
Wow.
The profile led police to George Metesky.
Okay.
And he matched Brussel's description almost perfectly.
Really?
Even down to the double-breasted suit.
No way.
Yes.
I bet that really captured the public's imagination.
It did. This case really made headlines, and it kind of legitimized profiling in the eyes of law enforcement.
I could see why. Like, suddenly, getting inside the mind of a criminal wasn't just some story you read in a detective novel. It was a real thing.
It was a real tool
yeah.
that they could use to solve crimes.
So the Mad Bomber case then kind of paved the way for...
It did. It paved the way for the creation of specialized units within law enforcement, specifically for profiling.
Gotcha.
The most famous one being the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit.
Oh, right. That was in 1974.
1974.
And that's when things really...
That's when things really started to take off.
Yeah. So the FBI gets involved. Profiling becomes more, I guess...
more sophisticated.
Yeah.
The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, or BSU for short.
Okay.
It started out by trying to understand the motivations and patterns of violent offenders, and especially serial killers.
Right.
And agents like John Douglas and Robert Ressler.
Oh, yeah.
You might recognize them from the book Mindhunter.
Yes.
Or the Netflix series. They really pioneered the in-depth interviews with some of the most notorious criminals in history.
Really?
People like Edmund Kemper, Charles Manson.
Oh, wow. Those names send chills down my spine.
Right. What were they hoping to learn?
Yeah, what were they doing?
By talking to these people.
Like, was it just morbid curiosity?
Some people might think that.
Yeah.
But it was way more than that.
Okay.
Douglas and Ressler and their colleagues, they were pioneers in the field of criminal profiling.
Right.
And they realized that to catch these predators, you had to understand how they thought. You had to understand how they picked their victims,
Okay.
what their fantasies were, what set them off.
So instead of just reacting to crimes that had already happened,
Exactly.
they were trying to figure out how to prevent them.
They wanted to get ahead of the curve.
Wow.
They really believed that by studying these offenders, they could develop insights and patterns that they could apply to other cases.
Right.
That would help them to identify and catch criminals before they could hurt anyone else.
It sounds like groundbreaking work.
It was.
But I cannot imagine sitting down and talking to some of these.
No, it wasn't easy.
Yeah, the most disturbed people.
It wasn't easy at all. These were some of the most disturbed individuals imaginable.
Yeah. How did they even get them to talk?
That's a great question, and it's something we're going to look at in more detail in a bit.
Okay.
But first, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
So with the FBI getting involved and the rise of the behavioral science unit, criminal profiling was changing from like a fringe practice to something that was more formalized and widely accepted.
Gotcha. So we've gone from Lombroso measuring skulls to in-depth interviews with serial killers. The methods were definitely evolving.
Absolutely.
But were they effective? Were they actually solving more crimes?
Right.
And how has technology changed all this?
Yeah, how has this impacted the field?
Those are the questions we're going to tackle next.
Let's do it.
Stay with us.
Stay tuned.
It's just fascinating to me, that those early FBI profilers would actually go into prisons and...
Right into prisons to sit down with these guys.
Yeah, and like sit down with some of the most dangerous criminals.
Yes, some of the most dangerous criminals in the country.
Yeah.
Believing that to truly understand these individuals, you had to kind of get up close and personal with them.
Right.
So they spent countless hours interviewing serial killers, rapists, other violent offenders, just trying to get a glimpse into their minds.
It really does sound like something out of a movie or a book.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I can see how that would be so valuable.
Absolutely.
That firsthand experience.
It was invaluable, and those interviews really formed the foundation for what we now call offender profiling.
Okay, so offender profiling?
Basically, this is the idea that you can create a psychological sketch
of
an unknown perpetrator based on the characteristics of the crime scene.
So you're saying that by looking at the details of a crime, you could start to narrow down the type of person who might have committed it?
Exactly. Things like the choice of victim, the method of attack. Was it planned out or impulsive? The weapon.
Right.
Even the way the body was left at the scene.
Wow.
All these things offer clues. About the offender.
It's like piecing together a puzzle.
It is.
But instead of, cardboard pieces, you're using behavioral clues.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and just like with a puzzle.
Yeah.
Some pieces are going to be more
absolutely
revealing than others.
Some pieces are key to the whole picture.
So, for example, if a crime scene is super organized, does that mean that the person who committed the crime?
Yeah, it might suggest that the offender is highly controlled, very methodical in their approach. But on the other hand, if the crime scene is chaotic, impulsive, that could point to someone who's more emotionally driven.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But weren't they worried about,
Oh, yeah.
reading too much into the details?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest challenges with profiling. You can't always assume that a messy crime scene equals a messy personality. It's not a perfect science. It's a tool that can help. But you have to be cautious.
So then how do you make sure that you don't have bias?
Oh, bias is a huge concern.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into a case assuming that all serial killers are white males in their 30s.
Right, exactly.
Right, and that's unfortunately what happened a lot in the early days.
Oh, wow.
Profilers relied on generalizations and stereotypes, which could be very misleading.
Yeah, for sure.
The key is to approach every single case with a fresh perspective. You have to focus on the specific evidence that you have and avoid any preconceived notions.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I imagine it must take a lot of training and experience to be able to really set those biases aside.
Absolutely. Profiling requires a deep understanding of psychology, criminal behavior investigative techniques. And even then, the most experienced profilers, they know that they're dealing with probabilities, not certainties.
It's not 100%.
It's not a crystal ball. It's about providing investigators with potential leads, insights, directions to explore, but it's not feud-proof.
So profiling can be helpful.
Yes. Very helpful. But it's not going to solve every case.
Right. It's not magic.
No, it's not magic. It's more like adding another layer of analysis to the investigation.
Gotcha.
Helping to guide the direction of the inquiry.
And speaking of added layers,
yes,
we can't talk about profiling today.
Right.
Without talking about
technology, yeah.
It's completely revolutionized the field.
I mean, it's totally changed everything.
It has given law enforcement a whole new set of tools and techniques.
Like, what are some of the biggest advancements?
One of the biggest has to be geographic profiling.
Okay.
So this technique uses spatial data to analyze crime patterns.
Right.
And to try to predict where an offender might live or where they might strike next.
So it's like using maps and data.
It is.
To connect the dots.
To connect the dots literally, yeah.
So let's say you have a serial killer who seems to operate within a certain radius of their home.
Right.
So investigators can plot the locations of the crimes on a map and create what's called a hot zone.
A hot zone.
This highlights the areas where the offender is most likely to be based.
So instead of just searching randomly,
exactly,
they can focus their efforts.
You focus your resources where the data suggests the offender is most likely to be. It can be incredibly powerful, especially in cases with multiple crimes.
Right.
And then, of course,
we have social media.
Social media. Oh, my gosh.
I mean, it's got to be a gold mine.
It is a gold mine of information. Everything from someone's posts and photos to their connections, online activity can provide valuable insights into their personality, their lifestyle, their potential motives.
But isn't there like a fine line?
There is a fine line.
Between, using publicly available information?
Right. And invading people's privacy.
Yeah.
It's a valid concern for sure.
Yeah. Where do you...
Yeah, it's something that's been debated extensively.
Right.
We want to give law enforcement the tools they need, but we also have to protect individual rights.
Right. It's like a slippery slope.
It is a very slippery slope.
Yeah, where do you
draw the line?
Draw the line, between what's okay.
Yeah, what's fair game and what's off limits.
And what's not.
It's a tough question with no easy answers. But remember, law enforcement agencies, they can't just snoop around someone's Facebook page.
Right.
They need a reason, a legal justification.
Right. They need probable cause.
Exactly. They can't just go on a fishing expedition. There are safeguards in place.
Right.
But it is a little unsettling.
Yeah, it is.
To think about how much of our lives is out there online.
For anyone to see.
For anyone to see, including law enforcement.
And it's not even just like...
No, it's not just Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, it's not just the surface web.
Exactly. There's a whole other world out there.
Right.
The dark web.
The dark web, yeah.
A shadowy corner of the internet where all sorts of illicit activities take place.
It sounds scary.
It can be, but it also presents a unique opportunity for law enforcement.
In what way?
Well, it can be a haven for criminals.
Okay.
Drug trafficking, arms dealing, identity theft. But it also allows investigators to track these activities, to identify threats, even infiltrate criminal networks.
It sounds like you're trying to catch criminals in their own.
It is a bit like that.
Yeah.
Navigating the dark web requires specialized skills and knowledge.
Right.
And it's constantly evolving.
So we've got geographic profiling, we've got social media, we've got the dark web. It's amazing how technology is blurring the lines between the real world.
The physical and the digital?
Yeah, and the digital world.
It is.
What about DNA profiling?
Oh, DNA profiling?
Yeah.
That has completely revolutionized forensic science.
Yeah, I mean,
it can link a suspect to a crime scene with incredible accuracy.
Wow.
It can clear innocent people who have been wrongly accused.
Right.
And it can even identify perpetrators through familial DNA searches.
It's amazing how far we've come.
I know, it's incredible.
From measuring skulls to analyzing someone's genetic code.
It really is remarkable.
Yeah, but even with all these advancements, I imagine there's still a human element to profiling.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. Technology is an invaluable tool.
Right.
But it's not a replacement for human expertise and judgment.
So you're saying it's not just...
No, it's not just about algorithms and databases.
Right.
It's about human analysts who can interpret the data, look for patterns, and make connections that a computer might miss.
So modern profiling then involves a
real
collaborative approach.
It involves forensic specialists, crime analysts,
Wow.
psychologists, computer scientists, all working together to build a complete picture
of the offender and the crime.
Of the offender and the crime.
Wow. So it's not just about creating a profile anymore.
It's not just about the profile. It's about using that profile to guide the entire investigation.
Right.
From interviewing techniques to evidence analysis.
Okay.
To even predicting future behavior.
Wow. I mean,
it can play a role in every stage of the process.
Yeah. As technology keeps developing, I'm so curious to see what happens next.
Me too. It's a really exciting time to be in this field. The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
But as we embrace these new technologies, we also have to be mindful of the ethical implications.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that they are used responsibly and fairly.
That's a good point.
Because at the end of the day, we're talking about people's lives.
Right.
And that should never be forgotten.
So it sounds like the future of criminal profiling is this really interesting mix of...
Yeah, it's a blend of cutting-edge technology and good old-fashioned human intuition.
Exactly.
You need both.
Yeah.
And the goal is still the same.
What's that?
To understand criminal behavior, to solve crimes, and to make the world a safer place for everyone.
So we've come a long way from those early theories about born criminals.
It's been quite a journey from Lombroso's skull measurements to the sophisticated techniques we have today.
Right, and it seems like it's always evolving.
It is a field that's constantly evolving, and as technology keeps advancing, who knows what the future holds.
All right, what's next?
Yeah, what will they come up with next?
But we do have some big questions to think about.
We do.
As we move forward.
We do.
Like, could AI actually replace...
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Could artificial intelligence replace human profilers altogether?
And will we ever be able to, predict crime before it happens?
That's the holy grail, isn't it?
Yeah.
Predicting crime before it happens.
And then all the ethical questions.
Oh, yeah.
About technology and profiling.
So many ethical questions.
Yeah, these are all things we're going to explore as we continue our deep dives.
Stay tuned.
So stay with us. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
You know, from those early theories about born criminals to the high-tech tools we have now.
Right.
It's really incredible how much our understanding of criminal behavior has evolved over time.
It really is. And as technology continues to advance, it's just going to get more and more complex.
It's more fascinating.
And maybe a little unsettling.
Yeah, a little unsettling.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about how artificial intelligence is already being used.
Yes.
By law enforcement.
From facial recognition to predictive policing.
Exactly. But could AI actually...
Could AI
take over the role of human profilers one day?
It's a question a lot of people are asking.
Right.
And it's a really tough one to answer. I mean, AI is already so good at analyzing huge amounts of data.
Right.
Finding patterns, making predictions.
Right.
So you could imagine using it to create profiles of potential criminals.
Right.
But there are so many ethical concerns.
Like what? I mean, it sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, doesn't it?
To have an algorithm.
Yeah.
Deciding who's a criminal and who's not.
It's a scary thought, and one of the biggest concerns is bias.
Oh, right.
You know, algorithms are only as good as the data they're trained on.
Yeah.
So if the data is flawed or biased, the results will be too.
Okay, so garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. Garbage in, garbage out. And then there's the issue of transparency.
Okay.
How do you explain an AI's decision?
Right.
Can we even understand how it arrived at its conclusion?
So it's not just about whether the prediction is right or wrong.
It's not just about accuracy.
Yeah.
It's about fairness and accountability.
And then what about, human judgment?
Yes, human judgment.
Intuition.
To all the things that experienced profilers bring to a case.
Can an algorithm really replicate that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can an algorithm truly replace those years of experience, that feeling?
Right.
That tells a profiler something isn't right.
So maybe it's not a question of AI can profile.
Not about can it, it's about should it.
Yeah, should it.
Do we want to live in a world where machines are making these kinds of decisions about people?
Right, right. And if we do, how do we make sure that it's done fairly?
How do we ensure fairness and prevent discrimination?
Yeah.
These are really tough questions that we need to grapple with.
It seems like instead of thinking about AI replacing human profilers, maybe it's more about...
Maybe it's about collaboration.
Yeah, a partnership.
A partnership where AI can assist human profilers, helping them analyze data, identify patterns, but ultimately leaving the final decision to human experts.
That makes sense.
A blend of human and artificial intelligence, each bringing their own unique strengths to the table.
It makes me wonder if
Yeah, what's that?
if all this focus on,
On what?
AI and algorithms means that we're focusing too much
On predicting who will commit crimes.
yeah, like, who are the future criminals?
And not enough on why.
Exactly. Like, why does crime happen in the first place?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about individual offenders.
Right.
But what about the broader societal factors?
Yeah, like,
Poverty, inequality, lack of opportunity.
right.
All of these things contribute to crime.
What if we could address those things?
What if we could prevent crime from happening in the first place?
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
It is.
To create a society where crime is less likely to occur.
Yeah.
It's a complex challenge, but I think it's one worth striving for.
It makes you think that maybe the future of profiling isn't just about catching criminals.
It's not just about catching criminals. It's about understanding why people commit crimes in the first place.
Yeah, and using that knowledge to create...
Right, to create a safer, a more just world.
Well, that's a great note to end on.
It is.
We've explored the evolution of criminal profiling.
From the early days of Lombroso to the cutting-edge technology of today.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has, and it's clear that this field is constantly changing.
It's constantly evolving.
So who knows what the future holds?
I know I've learned so much.
Me too.
And I hope you have too.
I hope so.
If you're interested in learning more about criminal profiling...
There are so many resources available.
Yeah, or any of the topics that we talked about today.
Books, articles, documentaries.
Yeah, we encourage you to...
Keep exploring.
Keep asking questions.
Keep diving deep.
Until next time.
See you then.